expectations of privacy have shifted dramatically in the past few decades. Surveillance that once seemed outrageous has today become commonplace. It's just like what happened with fish.
Fish, huh? Fish are weird.
Wait, what? Don't worry, I'll explain the analogy. It comes from a fantastic essay by Bruce Schneier and Barath Raghavan. In this video, I want to talk about ideas from this essay, taking stock of how much things have changed when it comes to how we treat surveillance in our lives, and think about whether this is really the future that we want to be moving towards. Let's start with exploring some of the ways our perception of privacy has changed in recent years. Take this news from Microsoft, for example. Just recently, Microsoft said they caught state-backed hackers using its generative AI tools to help with their attacks. The security community immediately started asking questions, not about how hackers were using the tools. This was utterly predictable. The questions were about how Microsoft figured it out. The natural conclusion was that Microsoft was spying on its AI users. Some pushed back at calling Microsoft's actions spying. Of course, cloud service providers monitor what users are doing, they said, and because we expect Microsoft to be doing something like this, it's not fair to call it spying. So we can no longer call a company watching all the activities of their users spying.
I don't think so, pal.
Got it. Let's dissect this a little more. Spying traditionally means secretly monitoring someone's activities without them knowing. Was Microsoft spying? Because technically they did release a terms of service that provided that information. Some people say that if you don't read a company's terms of service, it's your fault if your data gets misused. I can see that argument. But let's get real. These documents are deliberately written in legalese, filled with vague language and buried in fine print, designed more for liability protection than to inform users. The myth of implied consent assumes people understand what they're agreeing to, but most don't have a law degree or hours to dissect these terms. Companies know this and exploit it, collecting mountains of data while users remain clueless about the extent of the intrusion. Microsoft apologists might be technically correct that the information was conveyed to users, but what's most interesting is how we're so focused on whether Microsoft technically covered their bases, instead of whether watching the every digital move of their users is right or wrong. We used to think that companies monitoring their customers to this degree was creepy. Apparently not anymore because of a vague terms of service that no one read. Okay, let's look at financial surveillance, because that's a clear example of how far norms have shifted. In 1970, when the Bank Secrecy Act was introduced, the government said they'd start monitoring transactions of $10,000 or more, and customers would be alerted whenever this happened and have the ability to push back. People were outraged at the time, saying this was unconstitutional. The government wasn't meant to be able to get your information without a warrant. And keep in mind that at the time, $10,000 was a huge amount of money that could buy you a brand new house in some areas of the USA. People still thought this was overreach. Today, mountains of suspicious activity reports are filed by banks every day about their customers for any transaction size, and it's illegal for banks to tell their customers about it, so none of us can push back. Every swipe of our credit card hands over data, and any payment account like Venmo or PayPal with $600 of activity over the course of a year gives that information in bulk directly to the government. On top of that, all this data about our finances is sold to countless entities. We used to use cash and consider handing over our financial data to be an overreach. Now we all swipe our cards and consider it normal that so many entities see every financial transaction we make. My, how things have changed. In all areas of our lives, we see examples of privacy disappearing, but we don't quite seem to register how much things have changed and how much surveillance we've begun to normalize. To understand this phenomenon, we can look to an unlikely source: fish.
Fish, huh? Fish are crazy, right? You guys ever think about fish?
You know the phrase, there are plenty of fish in the sea? It came about because the number of fish in the ocean used to be so vast. But in the mid-20th century, scientists began noticing that this number had started declining rapidly due to overfishing. They had already seen a similar decline in whale populations when the whaling industry nearly drove many species extinct. In whaling and later in commercial fishing, new technology made it easier to find and catch marine creatures in even greater numbers. So ecologists, specifically those working in fisheries management, began studying how and when certain fish populations had gone into serious decline. One scientist, Daniel Pauly, realized that researchers studying fish populations were making a major error when trying to determine acceptable catch size. It wasn't that scientists didn't recognize the declining fish populations, it was just that they didn't realize how significant the decline was. And this was because each generation of scientists had a different baseline to which they compared the current statistics, and each generation's baseline was lower than that of the previous one. In a 1995 paper, Pauly called this shifting baseline syndrome. The baseline most scientists use was the one that was normal when they began their research careers. By that measure, each decline they saw from there on out wasn't significant. But when you zoomed out, the total decline was devastating. Each generation of researchers wasn't taking into account the previous decline that had led up to the start of their own research, accidentally masking an exponential decline. Pauly's insights came too late to help those managing some fisheries. The ocean suffered catastrophes, such as the complete collapse of the Northwest Atlantic cod population in the 1990s. Internet surveillance and the resulting loss of privacy is following the same path. Just as certain fish populations in the world's oceans have fallen 80% from previously having fallen 80%, from previously having fallen 80%, and so on, our expectations of privacy have similarly collapsed. Modern technology has become a pervasive part of our lives, and this has made surveillance easier than ever before. But each generation considers the privacy that they've grown up with to be the status quo. So the severity of this disappearance of privacy that's happened over the past several decades and the complete change of the digital landscape goes unnoticed. Historically, people controlled their own computers and software was standalone. They backed up their files to floppy disks and thumb drives that only they had access to. This new world of always connected, cloud-deployed software and services changed everything. Most apps and services are designed to be always online, feeding usage information back to the company, and most users don't even realize it's going on. The consequence is that everyone, from cynical tech folk even to ordinary users, expects that what you do with modern tech isn't private. Our baseline has shifted, and this is at the heart of our collective loss of privacy. I like to call it frog in boiling water syndrome, because we don't notice it as it's happening, so we don't push back, but soon our privacy is dead. Are there any legal protections in place that might safeguard our privacy? Not really, because they too are subject to shifting baselines. The US Supreme Court effectively says that our right to privacy depends on whether we have a reasonable expectation of privacy. But this means that as our expectations continue to slip, so do our protections. The question remains, what now? Fisheries scientists, armed with knowledge of shifting baseline syndrome, now look at the bigger picture. They no longer consider relative measures, such as comparing this decade with the last decade. Instead, they take a holistic, ecosystem-wide perspective to see what a healthy marine ecosystem should look like. In privacy and security, we need to do the same. Ultimately, as with fisheries, we need to take a big picture perspective and be aware of shifting baselines. This is essential for figuring out what a healthy technological ecosystem would look like, where people's privacy rights are respected by governments and companies alike, and companies are allowed to recoup the costs of the services they provide without having to sell their users as the product. So take a moment, zoom out, think about the privacy that people used to have decades ago in their daily life, and the freedom they enjoyed as a result. Then ask the question, are you okay with the current status quo and where surveillance is headed in society? If not, you may want to start speaking out and demanding better practices. A huge thank you to Bruce Schneier and Barath Raghavan for letting me reproduce their ideas in video form. I think reframing our view of shifting privacy norms by considering shifting baselines is a crucial step towards changing culture around surveillance. You can find their original essay in the video description. I want to make sure that we can keep bringing you content to help make a positive change around privacy, but we can't do that without your support. So if you find what we do valuable, consider setting up a monthly donation to help keep us going. We rely on community donations for our work, and we really appreciate all of you who have joined our mission to help protect digital rights and online privacy. Visit nbtv.media/support today, and also check out shop.nbtv.media, where you'll find all kinds of cool swag that also supports our content, like this t-shirt here. Thank you so much for being here. Y'all are great. Wow. The plant is like our privacy, dying.